Hello. Some of you might remember that about 18 months ago, a certain person who has to remain nameless for the purpose of YouTube, Tony Randall, if you don't get the reference, you can take a look at my video, An Act of Heroism in an Old English Town, to check out the hero to whom I am referring. Anyway, this Tony Randall chap set up a particularly clever sting to entrap a BBC producer by the name of John Sweeney. He worked on their flagship programme, Panorama, one of the most trusted current events shows in the BBC canon. Randall set up cameras to record Sweeney asking a woman who had previously been known to be a colleague of Tony Randall to dish the dirt on him. We have film of Sweeney suggesting to her, over copious amounts of alcohol, that it might be advantageous for her to say that the gentleman in question had made inappropriate advances to her and possibly to others. Randall did this whole thing to prove how the BBC make fake news to satisfy their own agenda. Now, although the BBC said that Sweeney didn't do nothing, very shortly thereafter Sweeney was, as they say, resigned from his job. And that might have been a good thing, except that, as this gentleman knew and kept saying, Sweeney wasn't the only one. In fact, Sweeney wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. He was merely an ice cube from one of his many gin and tonics, rocking on the very summit of an enormous glacier of solidified lies, several miles thick, and grinding out the very ground beneath its slushy undercarriage. But of course, no one was listening to Mr. Randall, and the general opinion, when it was mentioned at all, which was hardly at all, by the way, was that it was a one-off and Sweeney was just one bad apple. But as Randall and his much maligned supporters kept telling everyone, it wasn't a one-off. It was far, far worse than a little bit of Sweeney. And now this has come out. This is from the Daily Mail. Martin Bashir is set to quit BBC. And this was over his famous Diana interview. He says it's a tragic way to retire. Tragic. So far as I'm concerned, the only tragedy is that Mr. Bashir has had a long and successful and financially remunerative career up to now, with no apparent comeback on his nefarious machinations. By the way, just in case you haven't had an irony overload yet, Martin Bashir is still employed by the BBC, well, he was up till fairly recently, as their religious affairs reporter, or head of religious affairs or something. Anyway, yeah, religion. Now, Bashir made his name interviewing Princess Diana in 1995, and everyone wondered how a little-known reporter, he was just a tiddler at the time, managed to wangle an interview with the most famous woman in the world. Well, if you didn't know, you are about to find out, you lucky person. Oh, yes, but before I get onto that, I want to direct your attention to Jeremy Clarkson. In 2015, Clarkson was sacked by a morally outraged BBC because after a long day's filming in the Yorkshire cold, and believe me, there's no cold like Yorkshire cold, the Top Gear team had got back to the hotel and discovered that there was no hot food waiting for them. Clarkson, admittedly a volatile character, flew into a rage. He fell upon the producer he considered responsible for the lapse. And this was a chap called Oisin Timon. And somehow, in the fracas, Timon got a cut lip. Now, whether the cut lip came about as a result of abrupt contact with Mr. Clarkson's fist, or whether it happened when Mr. Timon hit the floor in the scrum, I cannot say. But such terrible behaviour resulting in such injury was not to be countenanced, and Clarkson was out. I just thought I'd give you my take on the little situation that I just described to you, the insult of some bad language and a cut lip sustained during an outburst of temper after a very stressful day, in my poor opinion, isn't anywhere near as bad as a whole set of ruined lives which dominoed on after a BBC reporter deliberately set up an elaborate sting, including having documents forged in order to twist a fragile and lonely young woman to his advantage. But then, what do I know about such things? I'm only a human being, not a BBC employee. But the entire situation is so soaked in travesty, it's actually beyond the possibility of lampoon. For instance, Bashir got a well-known graphic artist who had been previously very much employed by the BBC, a chap called Matt Weisler, to forge the documents that proved various of Diana's staff were spying on her. And when the story came out, the BBC dealt with it by sacking Weisler. Not Bashir, just Weisler. And now Weisler, whose career was wrecked and who had to move house because of that, complains that he was just doing his job, and blaming him was like blaming the pen for a nasty letter. With respect, Mr. Weisler, you did the job. You might not have known what it was for at the time, but why didn't you make more of a fuss about it when the story did come out? And again, with respect to the pen, the last time I looked, it doesn't have a brain, or a sense of responsibility, or honesty. So, that's my opinion of Mr. Weisler. What about Bashir? So let's talk about the fake news he cooked up. He got Weisler to produce 2 bank documents, I'll put them there, which showed that 2 of Diana's most trusted members of staff were getting money from News International or a fictitious financial company on the tax haven of Jersey. This he showed to Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, who then suggested to Diana that she should allow Bashir to interview her. Spencer was a bit of a fool. He could have checked out at least the Jersey financial company and discovered they didn't exist. He's a wealthy man. It wouldn't have taken much to get someone to look that up, but he didn't. And when Bashir got a chance to talk to Diana, he told her that as well as this information about her staff spying on her and being paid for it, there were other things going on in the royal family that were being kept secret from her. For instance, that Prince Andrew was dying of AIDS, her best friends were reporting on her, and Prince Charles, whom she knew was being unfaithful with Camilla, was also involved in an affair with the nanny looking after their children. Diana swallowed it hook, line and sinker, and the BBC then used Diana as the tip of the bullet they were firing at the entire royal family. You guys in the USA are talking about MSNBC trying to destroy America. Well, folks, we get the sunrise earlier than you do, and we had the BBC anticipating your mainstream media by about 20 years. Now, that's something we Brits can be thoroughly proud of, isn't it? Now, just imagine the position Diana was in. No wonder she became prey to all sorts of dashing men who offered her some comfort and psychological protection from what she saw as the conspiracies all around her. She was stuck there in that huge, high-ceilinged, over-decorated, echoing hall of mirrors, and all around her she was surrounded by absolutely no one whom she could trust. The place was full of people, and every single one of them was a spy. Even her bodyguard had been tarred with Bashir's lies. He too was spying on her and selling her secrets to News International or God knows who else. Imagine the mental torture which would have been tearing at the soul of any human, however stable, but in this case it's a neurotic, not too bright kid who'd been deserted in childhood by her own mother and whose father had died just a couple of years before. Meanwhile, Bashir left the BBC a famous man and took up a lucrative job with an American broadcast company and became a much respected mouthpiece of the news. As I said, he was, until this broke, the head of religious affairs at the BBC, which just shows you what the BBC think of religious affairs, by the way. And recently he has had time off because on top of a heart operation, he got COVID. I don't know why they were operating on his heart. Perhaps they were just looking for one. But whatever, I do hope he gets better. I hope that this video isn't overtaken by less happy events. I want him to live, I really do. Someone like that shouldn't be allowed to just slip away. To paraphrase the final words of Leonidas to Ephialtes, may he live forever. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.